radio at all. Not even with the bombing plane that's coming over. All radio is dead.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Welcome to another episode of Horror of the Worlds, where we like to talk horror. I'm Curtis Gerhardt, and today we're talking about a man that probably helped create what horror is today. He's had many ups and downs in life and whole movie industry. Especially with his upbringing, you would have never thought that he would have made these kind of movies. I'll help make it make sense. We are talking about the one, the only, the main man, Wesley Earl Craven. Born in Cleveland, Ohio, August 2nd, 1939, and a mother that helped force him into a evangelical upbringing. So he was very religious, not really allowed to watch or read movies or books. He was brought up to be the stereotypical man. With him not being able to escape his own reality, he had, I'm going to paraphrase, I want to say something that he once said, where being brought up in a religion is a great way to start a horror career. Because I don't know about you, but with me, being brought up in a religious background, you always say, hell is the worst place imaginable. So what do you do as a kid? You imagine. Then you ask. And then it's supposed to be worse than that. Feels like a great cooking pot for a horror director or writer. You know, just how bad can you think it? Is it true? Is it not? I couldn't find a lot on his upbringing, other than he was bullied by a name called Freddie, and another inspiration that I'll talk about a little bit later on that I'm pretty sure we almost all know about, him and his brother looking out the window and finding a little bit of inspiration from a drunk. Cool little thing, like he later on went into Wheaton, and he was doing pretty good there with what I read. But he also ended up, when he was writing for the school paper, he ended up getting the paper shut down for the rest of the semester, I believe, for writing two provocative stories, one involving an interracial couple. Sign of the times, right? Then again, I guess it depends on where you live. During this time in college, he was reading a lot. He was reading actually a lot of some of the dark poetry, dark stories. Some of them were like actually Edgar Allan Poe, with what I heard in one of his interviews. Unfortunately, I did not write this down, but I want to say during schooling, he ended up meeting a director of sorts, and he ended up learning how to edit dailies, sync up audio and video, which was a lot different from how things are now digitally. In the meantime, when he was trying to make up money, after school, he ended up becoming a high school teacher and a taxi driver, which I couldn't see anything, but I feel like being a taxi driver for as long as he was, this is what helped create his imagination even more. Actually learn what people and who people actually were. With all this work and all this time away, and I'm pretty sure a lot of other things in his own personal life led to his first divorce, which possibly was one of the best things that could happen to him. Because with what I remember correctly, they just weren't meant for each other. Young, love. This allowed him to get more free time to start editing, and he ended up meeting a little-known director, and he was a director at this time because he directed one movie. The first movie, I believe, is The Art of Marriage, 1970, which is more of closer to a sexploitation, a little bit more provocative for the time being when it was in theaters. But this director was Sean S. Cunningham. Yes, the one that did Friday the 13th, that helped boost and almost, some people arguably say, start the slasher genre. Yeah, if I remember correctly, this is when Sean S. Cunningham ended up asking Wes Craven to help, or if he wanted to edit or sync together this sequel to The Art of Marriage called Together, which came out in 1971, which that was more of the sexploitation. But I guess more people, with what I heard, more people preferred the sexuality of The Art of Marriage compared to Together, which was predominantly more of a hippie movement as well. Cunningham and Craven becoming a little bit more friendly. Cunningham finally asked Craven, Do you want to direct a movie? It's easy money. Again, I'm paraphrasing a little bit. Which came to Craven's first directing and writing movie that also made a huge staple and a huge movement in the whole rape revenge. And since we're talking more about Craven and not so much the movies, because this is a movie that we will be talking about when that genre comes up. But Last House on the Left came out in 1972. And Craven was turning 33 around this time. Cunningham was 31. So when you think that when you pass 24, 25, you're washed up, you can't do anything, that you can't start over. He was 33, divorced, quit many jobs, out of college, and jumped into a very difficult, it's even more difficult now, but a very difficult field, and that's filmmaking. And when you look at movies nowadays, Last House on the Left doesn't seem that extreme, especially when it's earned a remake. But being for its time period, it was more of an anti-hippie movie. It was very provocative, very angry. There were a lot of things that were said about this movie. Supposedly, when this movie was being made or when it was filmed, people rushed the theater, the camera to try to shut off the projector, and it was just pandemonium when it came out. A lot of other great tidbits about this movie. I highly recommend you watch this movie if you're into kind of crazy movies or into a lot of the awesome early horror movie history when it comes to its time in the theaters. Almost directly after that, granted 5 years later, his more famous mainstream movie came out, The Hills Have Eyes. This is the one that helped him become more mainstream and actually get more jobs, just because more people wanted to see this one because it was less violent and reached a broader audience. Just because the movie's violent doesn't mean it's good. Just because it's broad doesn't mean it's good. Because a couple years after this, his career started rolling. In 1978, he had Summer of Fear, which unfortunately I feel like a lot of us haven't seen. It is a great Linda Blair movie. This one is probably right next to The Exorcist for me for Linda Blair. Deadly Blessings, another one that's hidden. People forget that he's done, or even know that he's done. As bringing up Deadly Blessings, he was making Swamp Thing with Adrian Bordeaux at the same time. So pretty much overlapping or right back to back. No rest for him, but he felt like he was finally making it and he was finally getting out of horror genre because he didn't want to be in it. He didn't like making these gruesome movies. It is unfortunate that it was us that made him make these movies. He had to make $1. After these two movies, both of them bombing according to Hollywood and all that stuff, and looking back at them, they're gems. There are some of his movies that we love from him, but you gotta think, time frame, a lot of these movies no one really cared for, no one really liked. So with a little bit of a lull, thinking that he was a little bit washed up, granted this was 81 and 82, he ended up directing a TV series or a TV movie called Invitation to Hell, but this was out in 84. So yeah, when you look at the time frame of only 2 to 3 years, it doesn't seem like that long, but try being unemployed or trying to write or trying to come up with something in 2 to 3 years while you're doing nothing else. That's a long time to self-reflect. So of course, when another movie that was almost guaranteed money that flopped again, create another movie or redo another movie 7 years that he did before, The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, with the famous dog flashback. I don't know, some people might say that that might be one of his worst movies that he ever did, but again, you need a paycheck. This helped project him forward to the movie that at least my generation and older probably know Wes Craven for, or always think of. When we hear Wes Craven, we think of A Nightmare on Elm Street. The one that actually helped bring back slasher movies from the dead, because they were dying out around this time, out of the mainstream. But Freddy Krueger eventually turned into more of a comedian later on in the 80s, which kind of helped create another subgenre in the whole slasher film. When you think of Leprechaun, Chucky, Wishmaster, where they were more snappy with a comeback or making things a little bit more comical, making these deaths more funny. Nightmare on Elm Street didn't really get him or open up the doors where he thought he was going to be, even though it was a pretty big hit back then. Here are just some of the movies that you may or may not have heard of until his next actual big hit where it actually made him and made the company money and actually become a little bit more respectable as a director. You have Chiller, 85, part of a Disney series, A Magical World of Disney, only one episode, 86. Deadly Friend, 86. Twilight Zone, which the Twilight Zone was when the series came back out, and he was only, I think, set to direct only take 2 episodes, and ended up directing 5 episodes. This is a movie that helped project his future in directing. And we talked about it in our zombie episodes. I'll try to put that link in the description if you want to check out those episodes again. But this is The Serpent at the Rainbow and the Rainbow, which was a huge... You know what? Go watch that episode. You'll learn more about that movie. It is honestly probably one of my favorite actual zombie movies that is extremely plausible. That movie was also based off a book, helped launch his career, be a little bit more well-known and respected, like I said, because he was making a movie off of a book. Kind of get the stink of Freddy Krueger from him, so he tried to almost create a new villain that everyone loved, which only a few people loved. And that is Shocker. This is a great movie because you have a criminal that gets pretty much electrocuted and becomes electrified with power. Which a main villain, I almost kind of wish that he became the next, Freddy Krueger in a sense. But, he was called onto bigger roles. Sorry, Craven. But for what we all know, Mitch Pileggi, I'm pretty sure I'm mispronouncing his last name, but he was Horace Pinker in this movie. But we know him as Walter Skinner in the X-Files. I know that's where I first saw him until I watched Shocker. I'm like, oh my God, it's the guy from X-Files. No, it's the guy from Shocker. But that movie didn't really have any acclaim. Like, it was only a fan favorite. It's also kind of crazy. A man that you thought that had it all, looking back at it. And also got to remember, all these things take years for it to come out, to come to fruition. He lost out on Beetlejuice because he wasn't doing comedies and didn't think that he could do comedies, which I'm glad Tim Burton did. Christopher Reeve didn't want him touching Superman 4 because horror didn't want Superman turning down that route, which that was a bullet that was dodged. I didn't find the name of the man. I'm pretty sure I could have found it if I dug deeper, but there was a man in India that sued Craven for $30 million for copying his Nightmare on Elm Street script, which isn't an uncommon practice because it is, you have a lot of people that are scam artists where they claim that a director or a writer stole their script so they could get an easy paycheck. It's unfortunate, but it's been happening, I want to say, probably since 4 movies were a thing. Around this time frame, everything just happens at once, right? He ended up getting divorced from his wife that he was with then, and pretty much swearing off a relationship because he found her cheating. All this happened before A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. So a man that potentially had it all was losing everything and just couldn't move forward, but he did. Again, enough of those little tidbits. Moving on to one of his next movies that I think was a big sleeper and didn't really become more well-known until, if I read correctly, Jordan Peele is going to be directing the remake of this movie, The People Under the Stairs, that came out in 1991, which this is also another great, I borderline want to say blaxploitation. It is another great example of a poverty area, much like Candyman is and was. So this was another movie that kind of helped get him some kind of light. And so after People Under the Stairs became my favorite Freddy Krueger movie. And this is when he was dipping his toes into the whole metaverse, if you want to say. Because this is when Krueger became scary again. He wasn't making those wisecrack jokes, and this became more plausible and also a deeper meaning within the movie itself, being that fan culture is toxic. Eric can be very toxic, and you can't escape these roles. So this was almost his own way of expressing himself in Wes Craven's A New Nightmare. The great thing about that movie was it brought back all the original cast from Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, except for Johnny Depp, but she has, I think, a cameo in a TV spot that he's doing on Oprah or some shit. But Wes Craven plays a small part. Bob Shea has a small part. Everyone comes back, and all the main cast comes back. It's a great movie. This is one of the movies that helped give a comedian, this is my director for this movie. When he was trying to reinvent himself, he was tired of doing horror movies at this time. But there was also a very big comedian that was tired of doing comedies at this time period as well. And that comedian was Eddie Murphy. And we talked about this movie again in our vampire episode. I'll try to link that one in the notes as well. But A Vampire in Brooklyn. Possibly one of my favorite vampire Dracula-esque films. Because it's a movie that you don't really see Eddie Murphy in at all anymore, because this was his pretty much one shot at trying to do horror. This movie didn't really do anything either. It was another bomb in how they describe bombs. So yeah, you think that when you look back at Craven's career and thinking that he had it all, he did all these amazing movies, he's always had work, always had these amazing movies. But when you actually look back at things, he had rough times. These movies that we love weren't loved at the time. Not by the masses, because horror wasn't big and loved like it is nowadays. Somehow he got out of luck, and he didn't even want to do this movie. But another movie that helped create a franchise that's still going on today, however you feel about it, Scary Movie. Came out, oh wait a minute. It was later renamed Scream in 1996. So this is the one that became meta. So with Scream being such a big hit, and with it being written by Kevin Williamson, which he was able to do, or does, teenage, that whole high school dialogue incredibly well, creating that feeling which Wes Craven is able to get. Because just because you have a great script doesn't mean it's going to be a good movie. But just because you have a great director doesn't mean it's going to be a good movie either. But with came Scream was a 3-picture deal. So Scream, Scream 2, and then Scream 3. So he went back, did Scream 2, made even more movie than the first one. So, of course, there had to have been a Scream 3. And this is where the Scream franchise starts to kind of do that little roller coaster thing. But this is also one of the great things, is this started giving him a little bit more power, where he was able to get more movies under his belt. It was something that he wanted to do. Unfortunately, probably one of the very few things that the Weinsteins did kind of helped boost someone's career in a almost positive light. And it was, Craven said that the only way that he'll do a scary movie, Scream, is if he was able to do another movie that he wants to do for himself. And this was a movie that was supposed to be led by Madonna, because she was kind of big at this time as well. She was a movie star and a pop star. She even went through, I think, a couple months of training on the violin for Music of the Heart, which was not a horror movie. There were issues between Craven and Madonna, because Madonna wanted it to be her movie, but Craven wanted it to be his movie. And he didn't want to give up his one and only shot of actually trying to possibly getting out of horror movies. But Madonna dropped out, and he was able to get Meryl Streep, which at the time I want to say that she kind of retired from the movies, and she wasn't within the bracket of who he really wanted. But she didn't really know who Wes Craven was, and probably wouldn't have done the movie if she'd known that he was a horror director making this movie to possibly hurt her career. This is still one of the movies that it's been on my watch list for fucking years. I will end up watching it, and I'll probably love it because it's Craven. However, that movie did kind of help get him out of the slashers a little bit later on, to become more of a thought-provoking and more of a thriller movie, which was Red Eye, that came out in 2005. So about 6 years later, he got another chance of doing not a straight-up slasher. But he also did a werewolf movie just right before this called Cursed. You could say that he did this one, but I think he was like the 4th director hired for this movie, or he was fired and 3 other directors. Like, Cursed. If you're old enough to go out drinking and you know what a trash can is, all the different drinks, got the Red Bull in there, that's pretty much what this movie was. It's good, but goddamn is it a mess. And unfortunately, we'll probably never get a Craven cut because supposedly that does not exist. It's because there's been times where, like, I think originally the two main characters were supposed to be love interest. They shot it as love interest, came back and did reshoots, but they were brother and sister during the reshoots. So they didn't even know who anyone was. The movie was a mess. You had other actors in it. I even want to say, even had Skeet Ulrich in it for a hot minute, which is crazy to think that. I don't know. He might have made the movie better. The movie would have been better in all reality. But yeah, with Cursed and Red Eye, this was kind of the end of his directing career. He became more of a producer and helped start off a lot of other people's careers, or attempted to start off their careers. You'll see like a lot of movies with Wes Craven Presents. He was helping that. He was many executive producer or executive produced a TV show called Project Greenlight, which was also produced by, I want to say, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, which helped kind of create an awesome freaking movie if you're into those random freaking alien movies, called Feast. So if you want to watch, oh man, I don't even know how to describe how you want to watch these two in order. So you can watch the movie Feast first, where you see the finished project, and then if you want to see the behind the scenes and how it was made, you could try to find the Project Greenlight episode of that movie. After Cursed and Red Eye, he did do a short segment on Peri Jatame. I'm pretty sure I mispronounced that one. I'll probably post the words right here. Called Peri Lache. I'm assuming again, because I do not speak French. But he also directed another movie that was, I think, loved by a lot of people. I remember watching this in theaters and loving it when I saw it in the movies, because I watched it with my mom. I don't remember this movie at all, and it's My Soul to Take. I've heard other podcasters talk about it and stuff and say that it was just too many cast for what it was, but I need to give this one another watch. And this was supposed to be his next big franchise again, the one that was supposed to help jumpstart another series, almost another Scream. But it's hard to create another Scream when Scream 4 came out just a year later, which was his final directing movie. So I'm unsure if he knew around this time frame, or because I know he was very quiet, very recluse, and he had brain cancer, and no one really knew until he was gone, especially the fans. It was a big shock for me. I remember where I was. This was one of my 9/11s. One of these gods finally died. But with his passing, he left a legacy. Not many directors helped start a franchise or creates a huge movie that has made an impact in the horror franchise every decade that he was, especially starting so late. You have Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes in the 70s that helped start and helped rejuvenize the Rape Revenge, Love or Hate 'Em, or the whole family vacation horror movie, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Again, one of my favorite franchises, because my brother helped scare the shit out of me with them in the 80s. So we got 70s, 80s. What did he do in the 90s? He created or finished Freddy Krueger's series off, last Freddy movie, and the Scream franchise that's still currently going. Unfortunately, the aughts is where it kind of, you look at it as he helped start off other directors' franchises and lives and directing careers. You have his help start other directors' careers to more mainstream. We have Alexandre Aja's reimagining and remake of Craven's The Hills Have Eyes, which is help make me realize what movies I liked and didn't like when this movie came out. My taste has changed, but we also talked about Alexandre back in the French Extreme episodes. I think it was like episode 3. Was a major influence on a lot of people's lives. And I personally think horror wouldn't be where it's at if it wasn't for him. It's never too late to start. It's only too late to start when you can't do anything anymore. I hope you enjoyed this little episode about Wes Craven, and Hope to see you next time. Wait. Just one thing I kind of remembered because I forgot about it to record earlier on. I know I could do some editing, but no, I'm not doing that because I'm the editor. That's why it's so bad. Another cool thing about Scream franchise is it's based off of an actual serial killer that I will put the name in the description or the word name here again. Yeah, go look that one up. And if you're listening to it, I guess you're just gonna have to watch the video or read the description. Bye.